While that happens,
Okay.
And Rob gets some confirmation on a big story right now, let's go ahead and continue that conversation that we had yesterday about rent control here in Sacramento. So the big conversation was, okay, people feel like, bottom line, right? Like just putting in layman's terms, people feel like, especially if they've been here for a long time, it's unaffordable. People feel like the rent needs to be controlled in this area, especially when you talk about the downtown, the midtown area, as it continues to explode. That's a beautiful thing on one hand.
Right.
On the other hand, it's unaffordable. You're driving everyone out who is loyal, and not everyone, because some people are able to afford it, and that's a beautiful thing. But
let's be real. Part of the reason why we moved to Sacramento and decided to make that move from Vegas, from the East Coast, is because we knew Sacramento was a burgeoning city, was going to be growing this way. But I don't know that either of us took into account how this would affect us personally when it came to the amount of money that we spend on rent.
Sure, and then we'd want to live there, and then once you live there, you want to stay there.
Exactly.
And if you're not on a 3-year contract with one set, okay, this is what the rent is, then you have to know that each year it could potentially go up. So Walt Gray had a chance to sit down with the mayor of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg, to ask him the question, what are you going to do about the rent hikes here in Sacramento? So let's go ahead and take a listen.
Supply and demand. Because Sacramento rent is getting pricey, people are being displaced and they're not happy about it. There's a signature drive underway to get an initiative on the November ballot to cap rental increases on older apartments at 5%. It would also limit the reasons why tenants can be evicted and establish a rental board to oversee disputes between landlords and renters. The mayor is caught in the middle.
On the one hand, I think we should protect people who are being victimized by unreasonable rent increases. On the other hand, I worry about an unintended consequence of sending a signal to builders and others to not build in Sacramento anymore. Because ultimately the problem is one of supply. We need more housing. I'm working with all the stakeholders and the parties to try to negotiate a legislative solution that will protect people against rent gouging, but at the same time not send that signal that Sacramento is not a place to build.
Okay, so saying
walking that line. Walking that line.
I get you, people of my people here in this town. I get you. I understand you. I feel you. I want to fix this for all of you, but I also want to have a great city that's not even getting ready to explode, that is currently exploding, where builders want to come here and know that they will build and the supply will be enough and people will actually make these purchases or make these rents. So where do you stand on this today, Mr. Rob Carlmark, after hearing from the mayor?
Well, I think that he is in a tough spot because, first of all, he's got to do two things. He's got to make the citizens happy, right? And knowing that if people are not coming to Sacramento or staying in Sacramento because they can't afford to be here, that is a problem, because that's who you represent. You know, you're the mayor of the city of the people that live there.
The people, yeah.
However, one of the ways to solve the high price of homes and rent is to bring in more housing. It's supply and demand. The demand is extremely high from both the people that live here and the people that are moving here, number one. And the supply just hasn't caught up yet, because building in California takes a lot longer than you think. There's buying land, and there's permits, and there's zoning, and then there's, you know, you're in let's say you've got a 2-story apartment complex. People have been living there forever. Or let's say you've got a series of homes, historic homes in Midtown. They've been there since the 30s.
Refurbished.
And then there's a vacant lot, and they say, well, we want to put up a 6-story apartment high-rise. Now all of a sudden you're living in the shadows. Your neighborhood's drastically different. You can understand from that perspective.
Yes, and it happens to every big city. You talk about Los Angeles. When I was there and I was in college, it was sort of like downtown was really slumpy. It was going through a time where it used to be something iconic and really big and huge. Then it got to a point where people left there because it was too expensive, lived suburbia, and then now it's booming. And where my boss used to live is in the beautiful high-rise. You can see LA Live in the sunset. And now, boom, 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 because it's on the rise again, literally on the rise. Her view has been completely obstructed, and now she's leaving and renting it out so that movie studios can use it. So she's still able to make money, but we're not quite there yet here in Sacramento.
We're definitely not there yet.
Same story.
You think about places like New York, where there are more people than there are apartments. And naturally in any sort of market, the buyers and sellers will fluctuate, and they will find a balance, and that will be the market rate for an apartment. But when you have too many people and not enough supply, you get into a situation where if you have rent control, and I'm setting this up because it's where Sacramento could head theoretically if we had more rent control. So if you're in a situation where you have a limited supply but a lot of renters and you have rent controlled apartments, those rent controlled apartments become so valuable that it causes people to do crazy things. So I want to tell you about a story that came out of New York, and this was in, I think, 2013 or 2015. Okay. This is in Brooklyn in the Park Slope area. A woman was living with her elderly grandmother. Okay. Her grandmother was paying $287 for her. This is next to Park Slope. This is prime real estate in Brooklyn. It's the biggest, it's like Central Park for Manhattan, but Brooklyn. Okay. And the real estate along the sides of it, prime real estate. Okay. So she's paying $287 in 2015 for this apartment. Okay. Unheard of. Okay. So the daughter, the granddaughter, decides that she is going to pretend like her grandmother is still alive for
grandma had passed.
More years.
Okay.
For 3 more years, continuing to pay $287 for rent.
She don't want to pay any more than that.
Exactly. And if her grandmother had passed, which she did, the rent would have had to go up to market value.
Because that original renter
passed away.
Away.
Isn't that crazy?
But it just shows you the value of, trying to keep the status quo. Here's an example. I've got.
Did she get away with that?
Well, now, good question.
Sorry.
So the news part of that is that the co-op building that she was living in is now suing her for not paying full rent at market price.
So she went 3 years, though,
3
faking
years.
her grandmother's.
She was even giving these people updates. Today, my grandmother is feeling better. She's feeling a little arthritic today. I remember when this story first happened, I was like,
oh my
gosh.
The
truth always comes
out. This is crazy.
That's crazy.
But again, the extent that people will go, and we got you off, so go ahead.
So, for the people that are renting and think, okay, if we can get this done, because let's face it, it's very popular. If you're renting, there's more renters than there are builders that can vote. So, we're seeing the signatures come together. This may be something that goes on the ballot. But with that said, I just want to caution people that rent control, if it goes back to the cities and they can start legislating this kind of stuff, it may not be the magic bullet that you think solves the whole problem. Let me give you an example. San Francisco has rent-controlled apartments. Okay. My friends were in a rent-controlled apartment. These people had it amazing. They were right in the middle of town. They own a business there. They started a second business. These people work hard. They were doing well. But even with that said, the only way they were able to live in the city was because they had a rent-controlled apartment. Landlord one day says, sorry, it's too valuable. I'm going to buy you guys out. What do you mean buy us out?
I didn't even know that was an option.
In some of these contracts that
Hi, this is mine.
If they pay, and it was like 30, 40 grand, to break that contract, then they can go back to renting at market rates or to sell the property entirely, which is, I believe, what they did. Okay. So they were scrambling, and for them, and these are my friends, they were devastated. So let's look around. We can figure this out. San Francisco's out. Oakland's out. Then they start looking in Santa Rosa and some of these places, but their business is in downtown. It's in the Mission District. Right. So anyway, the whole point is that even if you have rent control, that can cap it at that rate for a while or slow the growth. If it becomes too hot,
it's not a smart business move for that. If someone else is willing to come and pay that,
exactly.
Would you
it was
blame
too
them?
hot in San Francisco, so that guy paid 40 grand to get them
that is insane.
Out.
Because he knew he would get that money right back and more.
Yeah, exactly. So the whole point of this is that we have to think about this problem of it's not just rising rent. All of this is connected. This is all connected. Now, the one benefit that Sacramento has that the Bay Area and Los Angeles does not have is that if we chose to do so, and I don't advise this because I'm not a big fan of huge urban sprawl, but you see the benefits of places like Dallas, of Houston, of Phoenix, of Vegas. If it's too expensive at the core, they can just build out. There's other costs for that. Now you got to build these beltways. And then, in Atlanta, come on. Atlanta, that's not working anymore. No. It doesn't matter how many belts, the commute is horrible. San Francisco, it's got water, it's got bridges, it's got mountains. You can't keep building up on some of these hillsides, and some of these are preserved. So you basically are running out of land. Sacramento, for this area,
I love this information.
if the region, because it's not just the city, it's the region, it's Roseville, it's the county areas like Alberta to the north, or Elk Grove, not Elk Grove proper, but Old Elk Grove and some of those areas down to the south. If they choose to go in that direction, you could start to build out, and you do see that. And the new development in Folsom on the other side, on the south side of 50, that's going to be like 5,000 homes. So there is building that's going to happen, which should at least slow down some of the rises in apartment rent, because what's going to happen is, and I just saw this with one of my friends, they said, I'm paying blank amount to live in Midtown, why don't I just get a house?
Oh, that was me.
Exactly.
Didn't I just have this conversation with you?
That's us. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But it's not going to be in Midtown. It's going to be in one of these other spots.
But then to get a house, it's a whole different story. You have to have your down payment. You have to have. I mean, it's not just simple. I'm just gonna buy a house.
The place right behind our building, you only need a 3% down payment.
Especially for first-time home buyers, there are benefits.
Exactly. First-time home buyer, 3% down payment on these gorgeous homes that they're building right behind our studio. I was like, Ariane.
You're talking about that new
development.
Yes,
I don't remember what it's called. The Wall?
No, not the Kramer. Not the Kramer.
I honestly don't know.
There's a difference. We went and toured them.
The thing.
We went and toured them.
With a market, like I was saying before, if you have rent control, it's lovely for the couple thousand that get it, but for the others, the landlords still need to make up that money that they're not achieving on that first property. So your rent is going to increase.
Right.
Regardless.
It's
not a cure-all.
It's a very difficult problem, and not only that is that it's so difficult to fix, and it's so difficult to address, because every issue, well, what about this? There's about 5 or 6 reasons not to do that.
Right.
And what the mayor was saying is unintended consequences. I mean, the world is filled with lots of examples of, here's the problem, here's the solution, and the solution creates 5 more new problems that maybe you were kind of thinking 3 might happen, but then other ones happen that you weren't really thinking about. So we're all frustrated because we want to be here. Yeah. California is great for so many reasons, and we understand that it's expensive to live here. Yeah. But are we really in this position where people that have good jobs and they're raising a family just can't live here at all?
So then some will say, and this is Geraldine Moore, she says rent is completely out of control and people wonder why there is so much homelessness. And so some people might say, well, then don't be in a place where you can't afford it and become homeless. Go somewhere where you can afford. And obviously that's not that simple, because then you go get a job. You're just like, just get another house. Why don't you just go buy a house? No big deal. There are things that come with it. But it's that idea of, I mean, in any big town, if you want to live in the heart of wherever your big city is, it's always, growing up, I've always known, like, oh, if someone lives there, like, gosh, they must be really well off. They must have a really good job. It's sort of one of those goals. So is that it's a status thing? Like, is that what is going to happen here now? What is happening right now is that, okay, unfortunately, that's going to drive all those who can't afford it out. But there are people who can afford it, and they're going to make this metropolis area everything it's going to be. Yeah. So is that a bad thing?
This isn't like the housing bubble that destroyed the Costa del Sol in Spain. You remember that? There were so many development projects that were left completely undone. We had the same thing happen here in America. It was just much worse in Spain.
Was this during the recession?
Yes.
2008. Okay, so lots of speculative money in real estate, and then it's going to go up forever, and the second it starts to go down a little bit, boom.
Crash. Well, now developers are more cautious. And so they're not going to build properties that they know renters will not afford. So to your point about people being able to move into Midtown because they have the money, that's just it. With the influx of people coming from San Francisco, there is no reason why a developer wouldn't create more luxury apartments versus rent-controlled apartments.
Because they know the demand is there for it, especially if bigger businesses are coming here. Go ahead.
Okay, so, and my caution about the Bay Area money coming in is this.
Culture?
No, not necessarily. This is a one-shot deal, because the reason why everything's so expensive in the Bay Area is that a lot of the jobs, if you've got a good one, or you made money in a real estate transaction, you bought low and you're selling high. A lot of people were in there 2008, 2009, 2010, and the percentage going up 30, 40% by doing nothing. If they just happen to own a home and were able to survive and stay occupied during the recession, They have a ton of money. But that's a one-time thing. You sell your house, the money comes into Sacramento. Right. Everything's on sale.
Yep.
Oh, look at this 3-2 Victorian thing in
Great time
Midtown
to buy.
for $900,000. And I'm like, that same thing was $400,000 when I got here.
Right.
And it didn't look great, and they just threw in some granite countertops.
That's what a lot
or
of
quartz
people
right now, because that's so much
a
better.
thing, right.
It's so much different.
Shiplap. Just take off the
Totally worth
wall.
$100,000. But anyway, that transaction happens one time. The big money coming in to buy up all this stuff can only happen one time, because how do you continue to pay these large mortgages, because the salary base in Sacramento just is not as high as it is for the Bay Area. And the other thing I would caution about all the people that are thinking about leaving, let's just take a teacher, for example. You got good grades in school, you want to be a teacher, you went to Sac State, you get a job.
Program, you got it, you're ready to go.
You got a good job in a growing suburb of Fresno, say in Clovis or something like that. So now you're making $45, $50, $60, maybe $70,000 a year.
Okay.
But it's getting really expensive, and you're starting to think, you know what, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Well, guess what? Your student loans,
ooh, they don't wait for anybody.
Your salary is going to go from $70,000 to what, $40,000 in Nevada. Less than that, maybe, starting over, and you have to get a new credential in Arizona or some of these other states. So you look at the housing prices, cost of living, you're like, oh, let's just do that. Yeah. But some of your fixed costs, your car loan, your student loan, some of these other things, maybe you have credit card debt. Some of these things do not go away when you move to some of these other places.
Right.
Because your salary's going to go down.
Right,
So
the cost
these
of living,
decisions, all I'm saying is I know in the comments, and we promise more comments, is some of these decisions, it's not as easy as picking up and leaving. It just isn't.
Right. I want to read some of what these people are saying, because a lot of the stories are just moving.
Yeah, a lot of people are sharing their personal stories.
Right.
Thank you for that.
And a 71-year-old who is low income and cannot find a place to live in Sacramento anymore. Lived here for a long time. Then we have Ronnie Stinson, who said, many had no warnings from their landlords that the prices just increased, and they came at times when people weren't in a position to move. And then it's like, what do you do?
What is protocol? Is it because you're on contract for that?
I think it's a month. I think you have to be
60 days,
notified
30 days?
30 days in advance that you need to move out.
Or is it per
You guys can correct me if you know anything
per
differently.
building, I don't know.
We're honest about it, that we don't know. So we're not going to go there, because we'd love to learn more. Maybe you have the answer.
Yeah.
Dan Cooper is asking the question, then what is a free market, and how does it work if people or businesses who provide housing adjust their product or prices to do what the market will allow? Meaning, how, if you're handing over the reins to the government and they're dictating what people can pay, how is that a free market economy?
Right.
It's a good question, but there are people who are suffering in your own community, and that's the problem, well, not problem, that's the challenge of politics. How to balance the demographics of your area and make sure everyone is winning.
Taken care of.
It's hard.
That is very difficult, because in some economic models, if you let the free market go wild, eventually you start to see a big separation. That there's, because let's just say this. Ready? Let's say, and this is actually a reasonable thing that could happen. Let's just say you live in the Bay Area and you were in a good house, you had a decent job, you made a bunch of money selling your house, and now you have all this extra income. You can come to Sacramento and buy something with cash, which they're doing all the time.
All the time.
So that's your house, you're taken care of. All you really have to pay for is property tax, maybe some other things.
Okay.
Now you got this wad of cash. Who's to say you couldn't buy a small fourplex in Yuba City or Marysville?
Yeah, that came up in here, that there's affordable housing there.
Right, exactly. So now you've got that, and then now what's happening in Sacramento starts going up $50, $100 in Marysville, Yuba City, which can be a commuter place into Sacramento. But now you've got that, and then now you're a landlord, and anyway, so that one person is now in charge of the living situation of themselves and maybe 4 other families.
Got it.
So over time, and then let's say that person does really well on that, you tend to find that the people that own complexes and things, there's fewer of them and there's more people renting. So the situation you kind of want to avoid as a community is a few landowners and everybody else is renting, because then you get in a situation where they're never accumulating any wealth for themselves. And they're always, like we do the news stories all the time, they're always one paycheck away, one bad accident. Let's say someone gets hit by a drunk driver. It's not their fault. Now it's a $100,000 medical bill. and they can't afford that, and they can't afford their rent, and their whole life has changed. And it's just empathy is what it comes down to.
Dawn Beagley is breaking my heart. She's saying that right now she doesn't even have peace of mind, and every day she worries about her rent because she says her rent has gone up year after year. It just went up another $100, and she lives in constant fear, has nightmares about having it go up so high that she can't afford to pay it anymore and won't have anywhere to go. She says that it's a stress in her life and it shouldn't be this way. And that is unfortunate, that something that everyone needs, everyone would like to have, a place to live, a place to call home, would cause somebody so much stress.
So at what point does someone in her position go, okay, I'm not willing to take this stress on anymore. I'm just going to go somewhere or plan a year from now to go somewhere where I can afford, and it's going to be better off because, oh my gosh, to live in that sort of fear every day, it's like, people are going to say, if you can't live somewhere, you at some point you have to make the decision to get out. I mean, that's a lot of times, like, again, for my aunt and uncle, and retirement's coming. They know a fixed income is going to be their reality very soon. They just know living in a place like Rancho Cucamonga that was orange groves at one time, and they moved there when it was like, okay, this is suburbia Los Angeles. Cost of living much different than living in downtown or East LA. But now, because it's become what it is today, tiny it's not a destination, but a lot of people live there. There's so many new homes going up. They just know they're going to have to leave the state, which is a sad reality, but they're planning for in 3 years. It's just, if we want to live comfortably, they can live there, but live in that fear, or choose to know we're going to go live in Utah, or going to go live in Las Vegas, or somewhere.
Or Mexico.
Or hey, go get a house up in Mexico.
I'm telling you, the number of expats in Mexico, every time I go down to Baja to go surf back in the day, I've been a little busy lately with kids. You show up to these communities.
Last time you went to Baja.
They're all Americans that live in...
My grandfather was, he lived in Mexico, lived in Rosarito.
The expat community, because for healthcare, for dental work, for a place to live. Now, you're not necessarily a landowner there because of the laws, you can't be. But they're just trying to find a place where they can just afford to sustain the rest of their life as it being affordable. So, when you have Americans looking at retiring in Rosarito or deep Baja because that's their option, that just tells you something about how expensive things are and where people are and how desperate people are willing to look. Not like Baja's a bad place. I love Baja.
No,
but for your life experience, it's drastically different than, say, where you were in Southern or Central California. Or Northern California.
Hector Roach III, the poor only gets poor because of poor management of money.
Of their own money?
He said poor management of their own money.
You, but yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm
curious. Do you mean that the people themselves are mismanaging their money? I think...
Or staying in places they can't afford.
It's hard. That could happen, but it's hard to judge somebody's situation.
Right.
Something can literally happen tomorrow to any of us and put us in a situation where we are no longer able to make our payments on things.
But isn't that life?
Anything could happen.
But isn't that life? I mean, you have to know, you have to have some sort of plan. I mean, how does that relate to rent?
There are some things that can happen to you. Divorce, medical.
A death?
Your
something. Absolutely, but is it up to the city to say, okay, you need to be sustained in this
No, but I feel like he was judging people in a way.
Well, he's saying if you can't afford something, get out.
Right.
That's essentially what he's saying. Or you're poorly managing your money. If you can't afford to live somewhere, eventually that's what happens to a sprawling area.
Right.
And it's I get what you're saying. It's
on
not
a surface
sensitive,
level,
but it's the reality.
On a surface level, we can understand that would make sense. Yeah. But again, everybody's story is different.
Sure.
Let's see what people are saying.
In some cases, I guarantee you, people are mismanaging their money.
Oh,
some
absolutely.
People, young people that have a lot of student debt, they live in a really expensive town. And
driving cars they can't afford.
Right, and they're going out all the time and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. As someone with more experience, you could look back at that and say, you know what, actually, that's probably not the best use of your money. So let's just assume that comment's coming from that place, because that does make a lot of sense.
We actually, tomorrow, Brittany Begley, our amazing traffic reporter, has a story for you guys about this super commuter who takes 3 hours to get to work, and she says it's all because she wants her kids to have a better quality of life. And so I'm sure that story will open up some more lines of communication if we want to talk about this further. But it's like, 3 hours to get a better quality of life? Oh, for a front yard, I think she said, for her kids.
Yeah.
So that is incredible to me. I don't know. It's wild.
She's not the only one. There are tens of thousands of people that wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and take the train, take
And
part.
it's if they've been doing it for that long, and it's all you know, you do it because obviously that job you're going to must pay something that can sustain your life elsewhere and also sustain that 3.5 hour commute and for it to make sense. I mean, a lot of people will say what we do every morning, getting up at 1:30 in the morning. For me personally, that's crazy. Like, how do you do that? When you got to do it, you do
have
it.
to do it.
So the 3.5 hour commute is like, oh my gosh, how do you do that? Just,
No.
You just do it.
It's crazy.
I
Beat
commuted.
my face at 1:30 in the morning.
Girl,
yeah, I know.
yes.
I know.
When I was living in Philadelphia, I had to commute to my job in New York, and people thought I was insane.
How long
But
was
I
the commute?
roped. It was about 2 hours and some change, and I
Same
roped
thing.
my parents into it. Like, my mom would drive me to the train station in Trenton from Philadelphia, which is like 35-minute, 40-minute drive. Then I'd hop on NJ Transit for an hour and 10 minutes. Then I'd have to get out and walk to my job.
And that job was worth it, right? It was a stepping stone in your career, and you're here today.
Oh, yeah.
It
Literally why I'm here today, because I moved back home so I could learn to be in television. I was still working in the fashion industry. So without that commute, I couldn't have made this happen.
So
You
sometimes
make
in your
sacrifices
life,
to get
it happens. Like people would say, well, that's not right. That sucks that you couldn't live where you worked. Well, you knew you couldn't essentially afford that as a single woman who was young.
It wasn't
right?
even that. It's that I knew I couldn't, not that I couldn't, I didn't think I would be able to break into the TV industry in New York, then go to find out I'd get my first job there. But at the time, I didn't think it was possible. So I moved back home only to end up going back. So it was what it was. Anywho, that's my story.
Got it. That's your story.
But I want to.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more stories just like this one, all you got to do is hit subscribe.